What ancient secrets hide within the sacred breath that bridges earth and heaven? Breathe deeply, sacred seeker, and feel the ancient currents stirring within your lungs. For what you inhale in this very moment carries whispers from the dawn of creation itself. The Hebrew sages understood what modern consciousness has forgotten. That breath is not merely oxygen exchanged for carbon dioxide, but a quantum bridge between dimensions, a sacred conduit through which the infinite touches the finite. They called it Ruach, and within this mystical breath lies the key to understanding how consciousness itself emerged from the void. Tonight we journey beyond the veil of ordinary perception to discover why the Jewish tradition has guarded for millennia the secret that your every breath is a direct transmission from the divine realm, and how this sacred wind continues to reshape reality with each sacred inhalation. The primordial wind that spoke reality into being. In the beginning was the void, and the void was without form. Yet the ancient Hebrew text reveals something extraordinary that quantum physics is only now beginning to understand. Ruach Elohim, the spirit wind of the divine, was hovering over the primordial waters, creating the first quantum field fluctuations that would birth our universe. This was not mere poetic imagery, but a precise description of how consciousness itself interfaces with the quantum vacuum to manifest reality. The word hovering in Hebrew carries implications of brooding, of nurturing potential into actuality. Ancient sages recognized that this divine breath was the creative force that collapsed infinite possibilities into our experienced reality. Modern quantum mechanics speaks of the observer effect, how consciousness affects the collapse of probability waves into definite states. The Hebrew mystics understood this principle thousands of years before our laboratories confirmed it. When we examine the vibrational frequency of the word Ruach itself, we discover something remarkable. The pronunciation engages the deepest chambers of the lungs, creating resonances that align with the Earth's Schumann frequency. This is no coincidence. The ancient Hebrew language was constructed to be a technology of consciousness, each sacred sound designed to attune human awareness to cosmic frequencies. The first mention of Ruach in Genesis occurs at the precise moment when order emerges from chaos. When the quantum field organizes itself into coherent patterns, this reveals the fundamental principle that breath is the mechanism through which consciousness shapes reality. Every time you breathe, you are participating in the same creative process that brought the universe into being. Consider the quantum implications. If consciousness is fundamental to reality's structure, then the breath that carries consciousness becomes the bridge between the observer and the observed. The Hebrew sages encoded this understanding into their very language, making every utterance of Ruach a reminder of our participatory role in creation's ongoing unfoldment. The sacred technology of divine communication. The ancient texts reveal that Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is not merely a theological concept, but a precise description of an advanced spiritual technology. When the Hebrew prophets spoke of receiving divine inspiration through the Holy Spirit, they were documenting real experiences of consciousness expansion through specific breathing techniques and energetic alignments. Ruach HaKodesh literally translates as sacred breath, indicating that the divine communication system operates through respiratory channels. This aligns perfectly with what we now understand about the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve that connects the brain to the heart and lungs. Modern neuroscience has discovered that specific breathing patterns can activate expanded states of consciousness, precisely what the Hebrew mystics achieved through their sacred breath practices. The prophets described experiencing Ruach as a wind that came upon them, endowing them with supernatural abilities to perceive across time and space. This phenomenon, known today as remote viewing or non-local consciousness, becomes accessible when the nervous system is properly calibrated through breath awareness. The ancient Hebrews had mastered this technology, using it to access information from higher dimensional frequencies. When King David prayed not to have God's Ruach HaKodesh taken from him, he was expressing understanding of a fundamental spiritual law. That divine connection is maintained through conscious participation in the sacred breath. This was not superstition, but recognition that the quantum field responds to intentional breathing patterns, maintaining open channels between ordinary consciousness and expanded awareness. The Hebrew understanding of prophecy as men of the Spirit reveals that certain individuals had learned to consistently access these non-ordinary states through mastery of Ruach. They understood that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but transmitted through it. And that breath is a carrier wave for this transmission. The quantum architecture of the multidimensional soul. Hebrew mysticism reveals that human consciousness operates through multiple dimensional levels, with Ruach serving as the crucial bridge between earthly experience and celestial awareness. In 9. The 3 primary soul levels. Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama represent distinct frequencies of consciousness, each corresponding to different dimensional realities. Nefesh, the foundational soul level, operates through the physical body and basic life functions, vibrating at the frequency of 3-dimensional reality. Neshama, the highest accessible soul level, resonates with pure divine consciousness, existing beyond space and time. Ruach occupies the crucial middle position, serving as the transformer that steps down celestial frequencies into forms that human consciousness can process. This configuration reveals why breath practices are universally associated with spiritual advancement. Ruach literally means both spirit and wind, indicating that the respiratory system is the hardware through which we access higher dimensional consciousness. Each breath cycle creates opportunities for dimensional bridging, allowing information and energy to flow between the physical and spiritual realms. The Kabbalistic understanding describes Ruach as corresponding to the emotional center of human experience. This is profoundly significant. Emotions are not merely psychological phenomena, but quantum field fluctuations that affect reality at the subatomic level. When Ruach is properly activated through conscious breathing, emotional energy becomes a creative force that can literally reshape circumstances and attract synchronistic events. Ancient texts describe how worthy individuals gain access to their higher soul levels through spiritual refinement. This is not metaphorical, but describes actual neuroplastic changes that occur when consciousness consistently operates at expanded frequencies. The breath becomes the delivery system for these transformative energies, literally rewiring the nervous system for multidimensional perception, the breath that resurrects dead realities. The vision of Ezekiel's Valley of Dry Bones provides one of the most powerful descriptions of Ruach as a reality-transforming force. In this prophetic vision, the divine breath literally resurrects dead bones into living beings, revealing the fundamental mechanism through which consciousness creates and transforms reality. This was not merely symbolic prophecy about Israel's restoration, but a precise description of how quantum fields respond to focused intention combined with sacred breath. The dry bones represent collapsed possibilities, realities that have fallen into entropy and disconnection. The Ruach that breathes life into them demonstrates how consciousness, properly directed through respiratory channels, can reorganize matter and energy into new configurations. Modern quantum physics recognizes that information is fundamental to reality structure, that consciousness and matter are intimately connected through information fields. The Hebrew prophets understood this principle experientially, that specific breathing practices could access and direct these information fields to manifest extraordinary outcomes. The resurrection imagery reveals that Ruach operates beyond the constraints of linear time. Just as Ezekiel's bones reassembled from scattered fragments, consciousness working through sacred breath can reorganize apparently impossible circumstances into coherent new realities. This is the deeper meaning behind the Hebrew understanding of Ruach as God's creative power active in the world. Consider the implications. If breath can literally resurrect dead possibilities, then every conscious breath cycle becomes an opportunity to breathe new life into stagnant areas of existence. The ancient Hebrews discovered that the same divine wind that spoke creation into being continues to operate through human consciousness when properly aligned through sacred breathing practices. The emotional alchemy of sacred wind. The Hebrew tradition reveals that Ruach primarily manifests through the emotional body, transforming human feelings into creative forces that directly influence reality. This understanding predates modern discoveries about the heart's electromagnetic field by thousands of years, yet perfectly describes how emotional states affect both local and non-local phenomena. Ruach governs the emotions of love and awe toward the divine, which Kabbalistic texts describe as complementary forces that must be balanced for optimal spiritual function. Love expands consciousness outward toward unity, while awe contracts awareness inward toward profound recognition of the sacred. This breathing rhythm of expansion and contraction mirrors the fundamental pulse of the universe itself. When Ruach is properly activated, emotions become refined into what the ancient texts call divine service. Emotional states that align with cosmic harmony rather than personal reactivity. This is achieved through contemplating divine energy that forms and maintains reality, a practice that naturally regulates breathing patterns and attunes consciousness to higher frequencies. The emotional aspect of Ruach explains why certain breathing techniques can instantly shift psychological states and even influence external circumstances. Emotions are not confined to individual experience, but radiate through quantum fields, affecting the probability patterns of future events. The Hebrew mystics learned to consciously direct these emotional energetic currents through breath awareness. This reveals why the tradition emphasizes cultivating specific emotional qualities. They function as tuning frequencies that align human consciousness with different aspects of divine creative power. Joy, compassion, reverence, and love each correspond to distinct energy signatures that, when embodied through conscious breathing, literally transform the fabric of experienced reality, the prophetic wind that transcends time. Hebrew tradition describes Ruach as the medium through which prophetic consciousness operates, enabling perception across the boundaries of linear time 112. This was not supernatural ability, but mastery of a natural function of consciousness, the capacity to access information from the quantum field that underlies all temporal phenomena. The prophets experienced Ruach as a wind that came upon them, suddenly expanding their perceptual range beyond ordinary spatial and temporal limitations. Modern neuroscience recognizes similar states in deep meditation, where the brain's default mode network disengages and consciousness accesses non-local information fields. The Hebrew prophets had systematized this process through specific relationships with sacred breath. Ruach HaKodesh provided prophets with what ancient texts describe as supernatural knowledge and abilities. From a quantum perspective, this represents consciousness operating at frequencies that bypass the filtering mechanisms of ordinary perception. The breath becomes the carrier wave that allows information from parallel timelines and alternate possibilities to enter conscious awareness. The tradition describes prophetic consciousness as clairvoyance, clear seeing that enables discernment of events across the continuum of time and space. Tov. This reveals that Ruach functions as a dimensional antenna, receiving transmissions from the quantum field that contains all possible futures and parallel realities. Skilled practitioners could tune this antenna through specific breathing practices to access precise information. This prophetic dimension of Ruach explains why Hebrew prayer and meditation traditions emphasize breath awareness. Every conscious breath cycle creates opportunities to receive guidance and insight from beyond ordinary perception. The ancient sages understood that the future is not fixed but fluid, and that consciousness working through sacred breath can influence which possibilities manifest into experienced reality. The light fire that transforms matter into spirit. Ancient Hebrew texts describe Ruach as composed of light and fire, elements that modern physics recognizes as fundamental to reality's structure. This was not poetic metaphor, but precise description of how consciousness interfaces with electromagnetic fields to create coherent patterns of information and energy. When Ruach rested upon individuals, it manifested as visible light phenomena, with faces burning like torches and accompanied by supernatural illumination. This describes actual bioluminescence generated by heightened electromagnetic activity in the nervous system. Sacred breathing practices can activate dormant aspects of human bioelectric function, literally causing the body to emit coherent light frequencies. The fire aspect of Ruach represents the transformative power of consciousness to reorganize matter at the molecular level. Ancient alchemists understood this principle, that specific mental states combined with breathing techniques could influence chemical processes and even transmute base metals into gold. The Hebrew tradition preserved this understanding in spiritual rather than material terms. The tradition describes how Ruach would gleam in sacred spaces and glimmer upon worthy individuals. This indicates that certain locations and people became resonant with frequencies that made usually invisible energies perceptible to ordinary senses. Sacred breath practices could attune consciousness to these subtle light frequencies, making the normally hidden dimensions of reality accessible to direct experience. Modern research into biophotons, the light emitted by living cells, confirms that biological systems naturally generate coherent electromagnetic fields. The Hebrew understanding of Ruach as light fire reveals that conscious breathing can amplify and direct these bioelectric phenomena, literally making the human body a transmitter and receiver for higher dimensional information. The cosmic return and the universal breath cycle. Hebrew cosmology reveals that Ruach operates through vast cycles of emanation and return, with the divine breath continuously flowing out from the source and drawing all existence back into unity. This describes the fundamental pulse of the universe itself, the cosmic breathing pattern that governs everything from galactic rotation to quantum fluctuations. Ancient texts describe how when the temple was destroyed and Israel went into exile, Ruach HaKodesh returned to heaven, indicating that collective consciousness affects the accessibility of higher dimensional frequencies. This was not punishment, but natural law. The quantum field responds to the coherence levels of participating consciousness, making expanded awareness available when conditions are properly aligned. The cosmic return described in Ecclesiastes, "The spirit shall return unto God," reveals that individual consciousness is not separate from universal consciousness, but temporarily individuated aspects of the same infinite field. Death is not termination, but completion of a breathing cycle, with consciousness returning to its source before emerging in new configurations. This cosmic perspective reveals why breath awareness is fundamental to spiritual practice. Each individual breath cycle mirrors the universal pattern of emanation and return. By consciously participating in breathing rhythms, human consciousness aligns with the cosmic pulse that governs all manifestation. This alignment enables access to information and energy from the universal field. The Hebrew understanding of masculine and feminine aspects of Ruach reflects the polarity principle that drives cosmic evolution. Like breathing in and breathing out, cosmic consciousness operates through complementary movements that maintain the dynamic balance necessary for ongoing creation. Human breathing practices can consciously harmonize with these cosmic rhythms. Close your eyes now, beloved seeker, and feel the sacred wind of Ruach flowing through the chambers of your consciousness. You have discovered that every breath is a prayer, every inhalation a doorway to the infinite, every exhalation a release into the cosmic ocean of being. The ancient breath that spoke galaxies into existence flows through your very lungs, making you a conscious participant in creation's eternal dance. Breathe with the awareness that you are not separate from the divine wind, but its living expression, its holy instrument for bringing heaven into manifestation upon the earth. May the sacred breath guide you ever deeper into the mysteries that await your awakening consciousness.